or the Chief Executive Officer, I'm not quite sure, of the CMC. So over to you, Victoria, please.
Brilliant, Dave, thank you. And if we can start sharing the slides, that would be great, thank you. Thank you everybody for hopping on the new Zoom link. It's amazing what you can do when you've got such a dexterous team in position. So it's lovely to see you all this morning, and thank you very much, Dave, for inviting me to speak to the Mediators New Breakfast Club this morning. I've attended many of these sessions over the past few years, and I'm really pleased to be joining you in this capacity. So for those of you that I haven't met, I'm Victoria Harris, Chief Executive of the Civil Mediation Council. I joined the CMC in 2022, and I've been in the Chief Exec role now for about 6 months. Before that, I was a solicitor for 15 years, specialising in employment law, and then I spent around 10 years in community mediation, seeing the power of mediation really across health, housing, community safety and education. So my experience has been both within and outside of the justice system for mediation. So what I want to do this morning really is 3 things. Firstly, introduce the CMC for those of you that are not that familiar with us. Secondly, to reflect on some work that's currently underway. And in doing so, share some of our observations about priorities for mediation. I've been in this line of work for over 30 years, and I think it's a really exciting time to be a mediator. I think we really are at a moment of change. So if we can move on to the next slide, I just want to say a little bit about my professional journey and perspectives, because it inevitably shapes how I approach this role. And my career started at the University of East Anglia back in 1990, where I did my law degree. And I didn't have the most auspicious start. My student residences were allocated to me 5 miles north of Norwich on the road to Cromer in an ex-RAF base with the most tiny bedroom and sharing a bathroom with 17 other people. So it was quite something. And the first morning that I woke up in Norfolk, I tried to tune in my radio, and all I could receive were the shipping reports. And I thought, what on earth have I done? And actually, as with many of these stories, it turned out to be some of the best 3 years of my life. And I put that down to the incredible teachers that there were at UEA. The motto at the university was "Do different." And you can say that with real oomph if you say it with a Norfolk accent. But it was a really incredible and formative 3 years where I had the opportunity to really explore what it looked like to resolve disputes in a legal setting. And so doing different and doing it differently was naturally part of that learning. And at the end of my journey, I was fortunate to get a scholarship to King's College London. I wanted to do a master's degree in law in ADR. And at the time, I was gently steered towards employment law because ADR was seen as a bit out there at the time. But I was able to do a master's degree in employment law, which had an ADR angle to it. I then moved into the legal profession. I became a solicitor. I always wanted to work in a high street practice where I was advising people on lots of different issues. And I graduated into a recession. It was quite difficult to get a training contract. It was really quite nervy starting as a solicitor at that time, because of course, back in the day, there wasn't the experiential learning that so many universities provide today. But I had 15 years in a profession that really was a huge privilege to be part of, advising people who were in conflict. And I never underestimated how difficult it was, how bad things had got for somebody to want to pick up the phone and come and see me and chat about the problems they were experiencing. Oh, I see something strange has happened to the screen, but hopefully that will come back. So during my time as a solicitor, I spoke to lots of different people about their experience of conflict, and I realised that we all have different approaches to conflict. And I also realised that during my legal training, I didn't really get much of a sense of the psychology of conflict. And I think that's such an important thing. And I know that universities are doing more on that today. But I would always be an advocate for mediation and speak to clients about mediation. And some people were really interested and wanted to find out more. And others looked at me as if to say, whose side are you on? So it was quite an interesting journey talking about mediation to lots of different people over 15 years. But after a period of time in the legal sector, I came back to my first love of mediation and looking at how we resolve disputes. And I was really fortunate to see a tiny advert in a local newspaper for an organisation called Mediation Hertfordshire. And I thought, oh, I wonder what they do. I was living in Herts, and I went along to an open day. And after that, I joined that organisation as a volunteer. They were a community mediation organisation serving the population of Herts. I then became its caseworker, which I have to say was probably one of the most difficult jobs I've ever done, holding cases together and getting them to a mediation. I then became the chief exec of that organisation. And at that time, I had a very supportive board of trustees who were supportive of me doing some research about the community mediation sector. I was astounded at the professionalism and contribution that volunteer mediators made to the local community. And I thought, why does this not have a greater profile? So I wrote a couple of reports, Transforming Community Conflict and the Cost of Community Conflict. We shared those with all of the MPs at Westminster and sought to influence to provide a greater profile for community mediation. I then took a little bit of time out to help a family member, and after a few months I was contacted by the CMC who said, would you come and work with us? We're really keen to support the community mediation sector and provide a platform for it. Also, we want to do the same for peer mediation training in schools, of which I had had experience during my time at Mediation Herts. And we also want to set up a new academic forum. So that's how I started with CMC. So I've seen mediation operating in quite different contexts. And since joining the CMC, I've been thinking quite a lot about how the different sectors of mediation fit together and sit alongside one another. So I'd like to move to the next slide, if I can, and say a few things about the Civil Mediation Council. And apologies for those of you that have heard this many times before, but the CMC was established in 2003. It achieved charity status in 2015. It's the largest self-regulatory body for non-family mediators in England and Wales. We have now around 1,100 members. Around 900 of those are individual mediators, and the balance tend to be mediation organisations, whether they're providers or training organisations. They could be peer mediation trainers, academic members, and community providers as well. So CMC exists because of a lot of volunteer effort. And I want to be really, really clear about that. The scale of the organisation relative to its responsibilities is something worth mentioning. I think sometimes there's an assumption that the CMC is a really large body, but it's not. It operates with a very small core team, myself, Angela and Joe in CMC Secretariat, and Paula in our communications team. Most of the work is delivered through volunteers, board members, committees and working groups, which I'm going to come on to talk about. So in reality, a significant amount of what the CMC manages to achieve is because people contribute time alongside their professional roles. So if we could move to the next slide, please. So as I say, the CMC is a charity. If you look on the Charity Commission website, you'll see some information about what we do, but just to distill the charitable purpose, it really boils down to two things. One is to promote the resolution of disputes through mediation, and the other is to advance public understanding of mediation and to educate about mediation. And I think we've done pretty well with the first one. I think there's more work to be done around advancing public education around mediation. I'm going to say a little bit more about that as we go through the session this morning. So moving on to the next slide, I think I've mentioned about the small core operational team that we have and the heavy reliance on volunteers. As I go through the presentation this morning, I'm hoping that some of you will think, oh, actually, I might like to contribute to that. And if so, we would be delighted to have you on board to support the efforts and to support your interests and provide you with wider networks. So at the very end of the presentation, I'll give some contact details about how you can get in contact if any of this resonates with you and you want to get more involved. So moving to the next slide, I would say that the CMC has four key functions: regulation, consultation, education, and influence. I'm going to come on to talk a little bit about the Mediation Standards Board and also the consultation work that the CMC does across the sector and with stakeholders, and also its role in terms of providing education and information for the public and practitioners, and the work that the group do in terms of influencing policy, speaking with senior judiciary and institutions. We have a government liaison committee, which comprises of Hetty Jackson-Stopps and Charlotte Steinfeld, and also Kelly Strickland-Coutinho, our chair, who work very hard to have meetings with individuals and seek to influence and promote and advance mediation. Much of that work happens out of the spotlight, so you wouldn't always hear about it, but there's a lot of work going on to support and advance mediation. So if we could move to the next slide. The CMC isn't a trade or referral body, so it's not there to provide work for mediators. As I've said, the role is the promotion of mediation and the advancement of public understanding. But that said, obviously there is a real indirect relationship between increased understanding and increased use of mediation, which does have benefit for practitioners. But the starting point for CMC is always public benefit and system development. So moving on to the next slide, I do want to say something about the standards work of the CMC. As many of you will know, mediation is not a regulated profession. Anyone can set themselves up as a mediator, and that reality makes trust and standards important. For many years, the CMC worked through the Registration and Standards Committee to look at standards in mediation, and in 2024, this was replaced by the Mediation Standards Board. So I'd like to say a little bit about the Mediation Standards Board, the work that it's doing, and the individuals who are involved in that, just to really give you an insight into that work that's happening. So the MSB is chaired by Bruce Bourne, who is a civil and commercial mediator. He is supported by Andy Rogers. I think many of you will know Andy, who works at CEDA. Also on the board, there are individuals from across the sector and from across different organisations, because we think it's so important to collaborate on these matters. So we have Dr. Mary Malika, who has a really interesting background and also has worked in psychoanalysis. Ben Walsh, who has a particular specialism in SEND mediation. Barrister Steve Hancock. Denise Houslin, former co-vice chair of the College of Mediators, who is also a training moderator for CMC training courses. Laura Kirkpatrick, again, a director of the College of Mediators, who specialises in community mediation and is a founder of Solution Talk based in Manchester. Holly Walker, who again has lots of different specialisms, but she's there particularly to support the peer mediation sector and the standards that are being brought about in relation to work that peer mediation trainers do in schools. Caroline Sheridan, who has a particular specialism in workplace mediation. We have our very own Roger Levitt, a civil commercial mediator. John Anderson, who's a professional regulatory consultant. He's also chair of the Complaints and Discipline Committee. And his colleague, Julie Byron, who has a specialist experience in complaints. Leslie Allport, who, as many of you will know, has worked with the College of Mediators and the Family Mediation Council. And Tom Thomas, who works with Gleamed, the Greater London and East Anglia mediation organisation. So a really broad group of fantastic individuals who have specialisms right across the sector. And the terms on the board are 2 and 3 years, so those terms will come to an end. And I think if anybody has interest in standards work, they'd be very welcome rather, to contact secretariat@civilmediation.org. And again, we will put contact details at the end if you're interested in this work or finding out more. So just a little bit about the work of the group. Some of you will have seen the Code of Conduct consultation that has recently been sent out. That work was carried out under the auspices of this board, and we've received, I think, over 30 different responses from organisations and individuals, which is fantastic. And I know that the small working group on the MSB that are looking at that will be bringing that information back to the next MSB meeting, which is happening later in June. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that develops. Other work includes work on training guidance, model agreements to mediate. You know, what could we recommend could be in an agreement to mediate that could be supportive for mediators. And also we have a small working group looking at guidelines for use of AI in mediation. We know it's entering the mediation room. What guidance might be helpful to support the use of AI in mediation? You might also be familiar with the mental health resources that CMC developed 18 or so months ago. We think that the interplay between conflict and mental health is really important. There's video content on the CMC website about conflict and mental health. Really recommend you look at that if you haven't had the opportunity to do so already. And that work happened because of the work of the Registration and Standards Committee and was signed off under the MSB. So lots of different and varied work and more projects coming up, but really wanted to give you a bit of an insight there into the work that's carried out by that group. So if we can move on to the next slide. I wanted to talk a little bit about complaints. I know this is not sort of a favourite topic really, but I wanted to give it the heading Complaints and Learning because for me, complaints is all about learning, and I wish that everybody here had the opportunity to personally meet John Anderson, who is the chair of the Complaints and Discipline Committee. I think, you know, there's a real appreciation that no one sets out to do a bad job. And so what this committee is about education and learning and handling complaints sensitively and appropriately. Of course, there are occasional circumstances of serious professional misconduct, which has to be handled appropriately through the formal process. We need to show professional accountability. But I reflect back on my time as Chief Exec of Mediation Hearts, and a number of complaints would come in, as is sort of standard, and it's about sometimes being really helpful that there's this second tier that someone can go to once a complaint has been looked at through your own internal process. There's an opportunity for that to be looked at again through the CDC if you're a CMC member, and the complaint has reached the threshold of serious professional misconduct, that you can be supported and the complainant can be supported through a formal process. So I think there's a real benefit to CMC members of having this complaints process, and there's lots of learning to come from it. So as one key example is, there's been an observation that a number of complaints that have come in the last sort of 12 to 18 months have related to situations where participants have been neurodiverse. So what do we as mediators need to do better to perhaps help, support and manage situations that may arise. And so at the CMC conference that's taking place on the 7th and 8th of October this year, one of the sessions we're going to have is about the interplay between complaints and neurodiversity. So really, this organisation, this committee is set out to help and support mediators and to provide the best service to individuals. So moving on to the next slide, I'm really looking forward to talking to you about all of the different working groups that CMC currently provide. As I mentioned earlier, this is a volunteer-led organisation in many respects, and the working groups, I think, provide that professional connection and peer support across different specialisms, and they are a key delivery mechanism for CMC work. I think it's really important that the working groups also help provide a network for mediators, because mediation can be quite a solitary profession. Often people complete their training, they enter practice, and then they find that building their workload and establishing their networks takes time. So these groups have a number of purposes, and one of which is to help provide sort of structure for the work, but also connection and to enable people to contribute and also develop specialisms if they choose to do so. So just moving to the next slide, I'm going to take you through the 7 different working groups that there are now at CMC. And again, if any of these sort of strike a chord and you're not a member and you'd like to join, we're going to provide contact details at the end for you to do so. So the commercial working group is chaired by Carolyn Jones. I'm going to get into terrible trouble after this presentation, I suspect, because I'm not able to do justice to all of the work that the group's doing, but just to give you a bit of a flavour. This group put on an event with the Institute of Directors. They have a collaboration with Doughty Street Chambers. I think the next event is coming up in July on the topic of business investigations. The group are also putting on a mediation in session webinar for members and non-members on the psychology of property disputes. I'm really looking forward to that one. And they're currently also working on the visibility of mediators in legal directories, which is something that a number of members have raised with them. So that's just a flavour of some of the work of our commercial mediation working group. Moving on to the next one, which is our workplace mediation working group. At the chair, Dion Jury. Dion is a lecturer at the University of East Anglia, so it's always nice to catch up on what's going on up in Norwich with Dion. Vice Chair, Mary Coombs. Many of you will know Marie from her Bloom Mediator mentoring and also from TCM. This group, I think, has real significance to the CMC, particularly at the moment, because workplace mediation, I think, is something that needs a much higher profile. The group are currently working on a new strategy. A part of that is around early resolution of workplace disputes. So, for example, we have members who are interested in whether mediation could be part of a triage process in occupational health. Often absenteeism might be because of underlying conflict. So the group are looking at how mediation could be built into occupational health processes. Of course, we work with this from sort of the very beginning to the very end of a conflict cycle in workplace. So many of you may have seen about the recent roundtable that we hosted with ACAS, where we invited individuals from the Department for Business and Trade, CIPD, the Courts and Tribunal Service and others to talk about the current situation in employment tribunals and what we can do to reduce tribunal backlogs and to support individuals who are really suffering workplace conflict. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is about the community mediation working group. You'll see a picture there of some of us who all got together for an in-person meeting, I think last autumn. The current chair is Alice Matthews. She's the chief executive at Mediation Plus on the South Coast. This group was set up to support sector resilience. I think many of you will know that the growth of community mediation, it has not had a linear trajectory at all. It was thriving in the sort of early 2000s, and then after austerity came in 2008, it really affected the sector. And I think we moved from around 200 community organisations down to about 40 or 50. So it's really crucial that the CMC can help provide a platform for this group. The first thing the group did was set standards for community mediation organisations. That wasn't about regulating individual community mediators, it was about looking at what organisations can do to provide their service safely and effectively. So that included, for example, making sure that volunteers are DBS checked, and also that volunteers are familiar with safeguarding for individuals in conflict. Many community mediation organisations work with vulnerable individuals, and there's an acknowledgement there of the importance of those types of standards. The other big project that this group have been responsible for is mapping community mediation services across the UK. We currently have, I think, 31 services on the map. I wonder if it's possible, I don't want to put my team under too much pressure, but if there's an opportunity to put a link to the map in the chat so people can have a look at that, that would be excellent if we can. If not, maybe that's something we can circulate afterwards. But this is also about, you know, raising the profile of mediation with members of the public so that they can find a local service and learn how to sort of outwit conflict using mediation. And this map is something that we're talking about with the Department for Work and Pensions, the property tribunals, and many others to help raise awareness of mediation. We're also looking at making a funding application to the Esme Fairburn Foundation so that we can effectively promote this map to people who would refer to community mediation, such as police and crime commissioners, local authorities, health sector leads, particularly in primary care. I think there's a huge opportunity for mediation to be socially prescribed, or at least conflict coaching to be socially prescribed from primary care. And this is something that the Community Mediation Working Group are looking at. So moving on to our next group. Thank you, Joe, for putting the map in the chat. And moving on to our next group, Peer Mediation Working Group. We have a wonderful chair, Ben Harper, works at Quakers in Britain. This work for me is really significant. If you have never delivered peer mediation training in schools, you might want to learn more about it, because I did this work when I was at Mediation Hertfordshire, and the days were so meaningful when you're standing in front of a class of 9 and 10-year-olds and talking to them about emotions and conflict and empathy, and how conflict can spiral, and how it's a natural part of life, but how it's managed is all important. You really are teaching life skills to the next generation, and I'd encourage everyone to get involved if they have an interest in that. You may know that last year the group published a report, Resolving Conflict in Schools, Peer Mediation as a Foundation for Happier, Healthier Futures. And we are now promoting that report and the recommendations in it to try and embed peer mediation within education. It was quite interesting. I don't know whether any of you heard that apparently Finland came out as one of the happiest countries. I'm always interested in how these things are measured, but I'm aware that Finland has conflict resolution training at every key stage of its education programme. And I think that's perhaps not a coincidence. So lots of engagement with the education sector. We're in Birmingham in a couple of weeks' time at the National Association of Head Teachers Conference, promoting the report and promoting peer mediation. So a huge thank you to Ben and the team who are going there to do that. The next group I want to come on to is our academic forum. This is chaired by Professor Jane Bryan from the University of Warwick. Jane has set up a very successful mediation clinic at the university, and through the forum, which has now been going for around 3 years, we engage with lots of different universities and higher education institutions who are interested in integrating mediation into the curriculum, or they might be interested in setting up a mediation clinic. We also talk about mediation as a skill for employability. And as an offshoot from the academic forum, the wonderful Zora Kaziliarek has set up the ADR Researchers Network, which I think some of you attend, to look more specifically at research issues for different forms of dispute resolution. I've given talks recently at the University of East London, to LawWorks, and at a University of Warwick event on how mediation can be better embedded into the curriculum. And I'm not just talking the LLB or the LLM, this is relevant to those working in the health sector and studying business as well. So it's much broader than just sort of for law students. So we've got two more groups I want to talk about. The next one is the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Working Group. We have appointed a new chair, Afsana Gibson Chowdhury, who'll be supported by Claudia Hazeman Green. This group has the most incredible individuals in it, with the most wonderful experience of working in the ED&I sector. And this is not about ticking a box, it's about thinking what are the practical issues that are impacting people's ability to join the profession, to thrive in the profession, and what about people trying to access mediation services. So there's going to be some really important initiatives coming out of this, and the group is in its infancy. It was only conceived a few months ago. The first substantive meeting is the 11th of June. So if anybody's interested in joining that group, all are welcome, and I'd really encourage you to be involved in this group and the important work that will come from it. And the final group I want to mention is the International Mediation Working Group. And if ED&I was in its infancy, this one's barely a twinkle in the eye, but we actually advertised about this a couple of days ago on social media. The vice chair of the CMC is Nicolas Fournier, and he is going to be chairing this group, looking at what's going on internationally, learning from other jurisdictions, so that we can understand and share best practice. And again, if you're interested in that group, and I know we've had huge interest already, so that's great to see. Please do get in touch and be part of that group. I'm going to just say a few words now about the SEND panel. This is a panel that CMC co-chair with the College of Mediators. There's a lot of collaboration in the sector that perhaps isn't really fully known about, but we're delighted to work with the college on co-chairing this panel. This was set up at the request of the DFE before the pandemic, actually, and a lot of work has been done on standards for the SEND sector. The CMC and the college put in a joint response to the government white paper on the SEND reforms, and the CMC are currently working with the Department for Education about putting on a session at the CMC conference in the autumn, looking at those reforms and what that could mean for SEND mediators. The next slide, I hope I'm doing okay for time, Dave. Do tell me if I'm not, but we're certainly getting there. The next slide is about professional development and member support, because I think this is a key part of the CMC's remit. And I'm really delighted that thanks to senior mediator and CMC fellow Mandy Lenton, we've set up the Mediator Launchpad coaching programme. So for those mediators with between 1 and 5 mediations under their belt, the CMC will provide you with up to 6 free coaching sessions where you will be in your own cohort of newly qualified mediators, and you can talk about how best to develop your mediation business and bring any concerns and thoughts to that group and receive sort of coaching from an experienced mediator. I also wanted to touch on the issue of observations. So CMC Secretariat hold a list of experienced mediators who are willing and able and enthusiastic to provide observation opportunities to individuals who are starting out. There's something also that I wanted to flag, which is that there is no requirement to have observations or experience of mediation to become a CMC member mediator. As soon as you've completed your CMC accredited training, you can join as an associate member and have all of the benefits of the Launchpad coaching programme and the other benefits that I'll mention. But if you want to move from associate to registered mediator, which is the next step, then there are observation and experience points to get under your belt, and we think that's important. Whether we've got it completely right is something that we are looking into. I think it's a little bit complicated. So it's something that the CMC board are asking the MSB to look at to see if we can simplify that and make that easier for people. So other CMC benefits include discounts on insurance, the monthly mediation messenger newsletter, which updates about developments in the profession. Our webinar programme, Mediation in Session, is something I've already mentioned. And actually, as part of that, earlier this year, we delivered a webinar about developing your own mediation practice. If you haven't seen that and you would like to see it, we're very happy to provide you with a copy of that recording. I think that could be quite helpful, particularly to people who are starting out. So moving on to the next slide, just wanted to say a few words about our annual conference. This year it's taking place slightly earlier than normal because we've got the National Mediation Awards in December, so we're trying to spread out things a little bit. So 7th and 8th of October, 2 afternoons online, up to 11 hours of CPD. The topic is making mediation mainstream, which I think we can probably all get behind. Provides up to 11 hours of CPD. I know that there are different views about whether the conference should be online or not. I have some sympathy for those who want it to be face-to-face. I don't underestimate the value of that in-person connection. I think that the reality is that we have to think about how we can provide equity to all of our members wherever they're based, and therefore providing the conference online for CPD seems to provide that. But we separate out the CPD and the networking opportunities. So there are a number of in-person events such as our Spring Social, working groups, the academic lecture series, which hopefully many of you know about, and of course the National Mediation Awards will be in person in December. Just a few words on some of those events. The academic lecture series is a relatively new thing that CMC have set out to do, and I hope that many of you were at the event at UCL where Michelle Calapetis KC spoke about mediation privilege, because that was a wonderful event. And then a couple of months later, we were very fortunate to have Bill Marsh come in and reprise his talk at the CMC conference last year on the topic of the definition of justice and mediation, which was just a brilliant insight from an experienced mediator. So we're looking to do more of those. I am delighted to give you a preview of the next academic lecture, which will be, our speaker will be Felicity Stedman, and she will be talking about issues to do with workplace mediation, and that will be scheduled for November. So more information it will be coming out about that, but definitely one to look forward to. So moving on to the next slide. Now, I'm not going to give you a law lecture because I know that many of you will know all about this. It's quite something. You can, oh, and thank you, Joe, for putting the link to the CMC conference tickets in the chat. Just before I move on to the law lecture, the CMC conference tickets, the full price is £150, but there are many, many concessions. So, for example, if you volunteer for a community mediation service, the price for those tickets is £25, and there are other concessions if you are a student or work in the academic sector or SEND sector. So do have a look at that link. So looking at this slide is quite a joy to me, because when I came out of the academic sector and moved into the legal profession, I was convinced that mediation was going to take off and I was going to be right there in the thick of it. And I started in my legal career and just nothing happened, not just for 10 years or 20 years, it was almost 30 years before, you know, this momentum started to happen. So I think we should all be very pleased about it. You'll be familiar with the fact that ADR is now part of the overriding objective in civil justice. And I'm sure you'll be familiar with the Churchill judgment in 2023 saying that courts can actually order non-court-based dispute resolution, which is a bit of a mouthful, but we all know what they're talking about. So I know that there will be lots of cases that now come out talking about whether mediation, whether it's reasonable to refuse to mediate and cost sanctions and all of that. But I think this is a really significant stride forward. And then alongside that, another development, the small claims court, the pilot that we have for cases that are worth under £10,000, the 1 hour telephone model, not exactly mediation as we know it, but a system that's being operated by the Courts and Tribunal Service to support individuals in conflict. So we can see there's a real growing use of mediation in the justice system, and I think that's why we're at such an exciting time for mediation. And I just want to reflect very briefly on the definition of justice, because I came across a PhD thesis written by Dr. Charlie Irvin, who's based at the University of Strathclyde. And he looked at what was significant to individuals who were experiencing conflict. What did they really want at that time? What did justice mean to them? And, you know, it was really interesting, the conclusions. There were about 8 different forms of justice that Charlie identified. Being heard was really significant. Participating in a process to find a solution. Finding something that's kind of future focused, something you can live with, something that was good enough. That was really significant to individuals who desperately wanted to move on from the conflict that they were experiencing. And I think these types of conversations about how we define justice will be really significant to the future of mediation. And I know that Bill Marsh continued talking about that topic at the lecture that he delivered at UCL earlier this year too. So if you haven't read Charlie Irvin's thesis, do try to look it up, because I think that's really significant. So moving on to the next slide. Thank you. It's public knowledge that CMC have applied for charter status. An application's been submitted to the Privy Council. It's currently with their legal advisors. I don't know, we don't know what the outcome's going to be. If it is successful, we will rebrand as the Chartered Mediation Council. If it's not successful, well, then we'll carry on and we'll rebrand as the Mediation Council on the basis that CMC does more than support civil commercial mediation. And really, this is just about focusing on professional recognition for mediation, about strengthening the identity of the profession and standards. So I wish I could give you more of an update, but that's kind of where we are at the moment. As I say, it's something that is being considered by the Privy Council, and as soon as we have any sort of response on that, obviously we will let you know. There is no fixed timeline for the process. Hopefully we will know by the end of this year, but that's all I know. So we will certainly pass on any news that we have. So moving to the next slide, and I'm getting very nearly towards the end. I wanted to talk a little bit about communicating about mediation in a new era. I mentioned about the CMC charitable purpose, about sort of educating the public about mediation and the indirect benefit that has for the profession. So we have recently set out a new communication strategy, which is audience-led, not content-led. It's quite interesting looking at CMC from a communications point of view, because there are so many different and varied audiences, and I think we need to map those and cater for those. So whether we are talking to aspiring mediators or individuals in dispute, or small to medium businesses or legal professionals or senior government and judicial stakeholders, we need a more bespoke communication strategy. So that's something that we are working on at the moment. And there are 2 specific outputs from that I wanted to mention to you. And Dave, I think this will be of particular interest to you, because I know that we've discussed it in the past. We're putting together a new mediator directory. Why are we doing that? Well, at the moment, We have a map-based directory, which I think has less relevance in a world with online and hybrid mediations. But more than that, we want to create a directory to better serve mediators to develop and sustain a thriving practice. So really, this directory is your shop front to talk about yourself, your approach to mediation, your professional or working background. Let people know who you really are so that they can choose you. I'm really conscious that organisations such as the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy has a really good counsellor directory, and it would be great to emulate something like that for mediators, so that not only do you have the opportunity to put your best foot forward and say a little bit about who you are and how you approach mediation, but it also gives individuals the opportunity to find the right mediator for them. So that's something we're working on at the moment. And I know that a tester of that has gone out to board members and those who've expressed particular interest or concern on that topic, so that we can trial it and try and come up with the best option. Secondly, we are developing a new website, and this is where the public-facing side of this comes in. We want to separate content for mediators and for members of the public, those who are looking to resolve their conflict, find out more about mediation and find the right mediator for them. And as part of that, we're really keen to have video content and explainers about mediation to support people to do just that. So I'm coming on to some closing reflections now on the next slide. We can move just to the next slide, then I can just talk about some closing reflections. Thank you. So there are some key areas here that CMC are very focused on at the moment. So improving diversity and inclusion within the profession, supporting new mediators, navigating technological change, advancing public education, advocating for greater integration within the justice system, increasing access to justice, and promoting culture change for the next generation. I think those are probably really key topics for us at the moment. But of course, everything is always evolving, and I'm sure that if I have the opportunity to speak again next year, we can assess how that went, how things are going, and what's new. Because if there's one thing that's certain about mediation, it's that things are always changing. I have huge optimism for mediation. I think it's a great time to be a mediator. I think we're on the cusp of more positive change. And hopefully today has been helpful for me to share with you where CMC is at. And thank you very much for your support, whether you're a CMC member or whether you're supporting us from further afield. We really do appreciate your passion for mediation in our shared endeavour to make mediation mainstream. So just onto the last slide, which I did promise, which is how you can get in contact if you're interested in getting involved. If you're interested in any of the working groups, it's projects@civilmediation.org. If you want to contribute to CMC Comms, maybe you want to write an article or share some information about your experience that you'd like to get the word out there about, comms@civilmediation.org. Similarly, if you know of any job opportunities or tenders or anything that you think would be of interest to members, do get in contact with comms. We'd love to hear from you. And anything in relation to membership and benefits, it's the wonderful Angela and Joe at secretariat@civilmediation.org. So please do get in touch. We would love to hear from you. So I think all that I need to do now is to say thank you very much. There is my email address if you would like to get in contact with me directly. And one final plea before I go. We've got the National Mediation Awards coming up at the end of this year. Nominations are open. There are a really wide range of different awards. This, again, is a collaboration between CMC, the College of Mediators and the Family Mediation Council. It takes just 5 minutes to nominate, because this year it's slightly different in that when you nominate someone, they have to decide if they're going to accept the nomination, and then it's for them to provide the supporting evidence against the criteria for the award. So the nomination bit is the easy bit. So I would really urge you to make someone's day and nominate your mediation hero for an award so that they can have that recognition. I think I am done. Hopefully that's okay on timing, Dave. Thank you very much indeed.
That's perfect on timing. Thank you, Victoria. And that was really very extensive and worthwhile discussion. Oh, lots of clapping hands coming up. Hopefully you've got 5 or 10 minutes to take any questions.
Yes.
But before we do that, I just wanted to take up your point about observerships. On the list that I've sent of people who are attending, there are 2 columns for those who are offering and those who want observerships. So if people scan across the spreadsheet, and they will be able to see, I think it's something like 12 people who offer observerships, and so they can get directly in touch with those people.
Brilliant, Dave. Thank you very much.
Kush put something in the chat as a question. So if we can come to that first, and then if people can put their hands up. I've already got Roger and David. So Kush, if you're there, please, if you could just repeat your question for us.
Oh, hi. Thanks, Victoria. Really, really informative. Just a question about the fixed fee scheme. I'm a workplace mediator and I had said that I wanted to be on it, but just looking further, is this really applicable to workplace mediators, or is it more for civil and commercial?
It is very much applicable to workplace mediators. Are you not receiving any referrals through Kush from that?
No, I'm not. And I've kind of just renewed mine, and I said no this time because I thought it was for civil commercial. But if it is, no, I'm not getting any referrals.
Okay, well that's useful feedback. We know that many people in sort of the first year or 2 end up getting sort of on average about 3 referrals. So it's not sort of a huge amount of work, but it's an opportunity to say that you're part of the scheme, so that if anybody sort of is looking for a mediator in a particular area, then hopefully they will come across you. I am, it was probably clear from my talk, really keen to improve the mediator directory so that people can find the right mediator for them, and you have the opportunity to set out your specialism and how you work, and so that more people can find you. But no, thank you for that feedback.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kush. Right, Roger, if we can come to you then with your hand up, please.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Thanks, Victoria. Really, really interesting. Particularly interesting to learn about your your early dispute resolution skills being developed, sharing a bathroom with 17 other people. But I was going to ask if you want to say anything, or if you'd like me to say anything about the career path work that we're doing, as we've got so many people of different stages of the profession here.
Yes, so Roger, thank you. And Roger, you advocate very strongly for different forms of CPD, and certainly over the last 12 months, we've changed the definition of CPD on the CMC membership rules to incorporate mentoring where that leads to professional development. So I think CPD means lots of different things to different people, but having that sort of supervision and mentoring aspect can be very, very helpful. I think particularly for those that are starting out in the profession, to have somewhere that you can go and talk to about, some person you can go and talk to about your experience of mediating is a very valuable thing. I know that a number of organisations also offer that, often for free. I mentioned Bloom Mediator Mentoring. I know that Solution Talk have reflective practice sessions, and there are many, many others. So I think that's a really valuable development in the profession, that people are seeking that support. So yeah, very, very supportive of that.
Thank you. David, then, please, you're next.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Victoria, for that very clear and comprehensive overview of CMC's work. My question is about the impact of Churchill and Merthyr Tydfil. I remember this was a decision very much looked forward to, and when it was handed down, there was, I think, anticipation that this would lead to some mighty increase in court-ordered or court giving the opportunity for mediations. Now, I'm just interested to know from where you are if you have noticed any great increase in court-ordered mediations since Churchill. I haven't, so I'm interested to find out what your perspective is.
Well, it's a really interesting question, David, particularly around data, because there is quite a lack of data in the mediation profession, something that really needs to be improved. So much of my information I gained from the CEDA audit, and I know that they have specifically referenced that within the 2025 audit that they carried out. And I don't know if you're familiar with the stats. I know that. Is it 24%? There was a 24% increase in cases between 2022 and 2024, whether that's as a direct result of Churchill, but a number of mediators are saying that they have seen their caseloads increase since. And I think potentially the fact that the court can order mediation may mean that mediations are happening earlier in the pipeline because people are not necessarily wanting to get to a point where they are ordered to mediate. So I think there's that sort of pressure which is helping increase the number of cases. And obviously when we talk about data for mediation, and you asked a specific question that's relevant to the civil justice system, but I'm interested in also thinking about what's happening for workplace mediation and for community mediation. We know that both of those are increasing too. So I think there's a general direction of travel that's very positive for mediation. The University of Westminster has made contact with us recently to look at doing a study on uptake of workplace mediation, and that's something I'm really keen to be involved with. So great point about data.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. I've got three with their hands up at the moment. Carl, you came up next, please.
Right. Thank you very much, Victoria, for excellent and comprehensive. I must say it's a great improvement from past days. Well, my question really is about the technological side of the profession, because I noted that in your closing reflections, one of the things is really how technology is likely to affect the mediation profession. And it'd be interesting to know whether or not a working group would be set up, given the importance of this area. I seem to recall that there was a brief reference to someone being appointed to look at AI.
That's correct, Carl. So thank you for raising that point. So I think technology is jumping in all different ways, isn't it? Taking your point about AI, the Mediation Standards Board has convened a small working group to look specifically at AI in the mediation room. We have Roger Levitt on the call today. Roger is leading that small working group looking at the use of AI in the mediation room. He's working with Joanna Gosling and Mark Suskas, who's an academic, specifically looking at that topic. And there will be other people invited to join that group. So what we are going to do, and Roger, please correct me if I'm not fully up to speed, but I think there's going to be a consultation document going out very, very soon with a list of questions for members and non-members of the CMC about the use of AI, what's happening. We know it's in the mediation room already. And I don't think that's something that we necessarily want to be negative about, but it's about how these tools can be used with integrity and honesty and respecting sort of confidentiality of the parties and all of those important things. If I may briefly just mention a couple of other points on tech, I think case management systems are really important, and they're growing in importance, and they can really support mediators. I know that at the Community Mediation Working Group, we had a session dedicated to case management systems, and I did wonder if it would be a bit of a tumbleweed session, but actually it was incredibly well represented, with lots of different people bringing details of all their case management systems, what worked, what didn't. I think that's going to have increasing importance. So I don't know if I've fully answered your question, but it's a great point to raise.
No, that's great. Can I just also make one suggestion? Other professional bodies like the CIRB, they're working on this project. Could we collaborate with them and share learning, which would save a lot of time and reinvention of the wheel as well? So, yeah.
I love that idea. I'm all up for collaboration. I'm sure that our small working group will be aware of that. I know with the ED&I guidelines, for example, that are being set up by the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Group, we're looking very much at what other bodies are doing, so we're not reinventing the wheel, and that's great advice. So thank you for that suggestion.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. MacDonald, I've got you next, please.
Thanks, David, and thank you, Victoria, for a very lovely talk. I've put on the chat a suggestion asking whether it might be probably more reasonable to wait until the outcome of the Privy Council before compiling a directory. But I will rather suggest that we overlook that, because I realize that we are living in a digital world, and if you compile a directory now, it can easily be edited if the Privy Council approves a charter status for the CMC. So I thought I should clarify what I have left on the chat. But what really is dear to my heart is the academic lectures. I've attended the two that have taken place so far. I found them very brilliant. I want to suggest to the CMC to see whether they can compile these lectures and publish it in the near future, so that mediators will, be able to have a book or something like that to look at the lectures that have been delivered, because they are extremely, very, very enlightening, the two that I've attended so far, and I hope that that will be the trend. Thank you.
Well, Donald, thank you so much for your comments. On the first point, we're really keen to move on with the mediator directory. As I say, we don't have any timeline on the Privy Council, but the application to the Privy Council is for the CMC to have charter status as an organisation. So in terms of the mediator directory, I see that very much as a separate issue, and it's really important that CMC members have the ability to put their best foot forward and have their great shop front. So we will be moving on with that in the next sort of month or two. In relation to the academic lecture, thank you so much for your feedback. I too absolutely loved attending those. They are also live streamed, so people are able to see them even if they can't get to UCL to physically attend. We do also have recordings of them, so if anybody would like to see a recording, please do contact secretariat@civilmediation.org so that we can share those with you. And in actual fact, the first lecture, the Michelle Calapetis lecture, was published in a mediation journal, one that's where Brian Clark is the editor. So we do have a written format for it too. But if anybody needs more information on that, please do get in touch, because we absolutely do want to share. And thank you for raising that, MacDonald. Appreciate that.
I'm actually thinking ahead. People will do research in years to come. And I think if the CMC keeps a compilation of these and publish it, somebody that probably in 10 years from today will have to do a research will probably buy a copy or something like that from the CMC. So it's not only for now, but sometime in the near future.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, MacDonald. The last person I've got with the hand raised is Susie, please.
Hi, everyone. My name's Susie Young. This is my first time at this session, so thank you for letting me attend this. I've just qualified with ADR as a workplace mediator, but I've got 25 years in working in HR. And my question really, Victoria, was to just ask a little bit more about what work is being done to promote mediation in workplaces, because in all my 25 years of working in HR, I've never actually employed a workplace mediator and I do know a lot of HR professionals, and there seems to be very limited information around this.
It's really interesting to hear your feedback, Susie. And as
Yeah.
a former employment lawyer, I am very passionate about
Yeah.
that area. So I know that you'll be familiar that we had the ACAS roundtable where we worked with organisations like CIPD and others. And actually CIPD representatives are part of the workplace working group. So we try to cascade information down in relation to that. I also know that the workplace group have events such as meeting with local authorities to encourage them to have a greater uptake of workplace mediation. It's a constant effort. There has to be constant and regular briefings and events, and the workplace working group do that. I don't know if you might be interested in joining.
I would be, yes, because I mean, there seems to be a real lack of information, I think, for HR professionals. CIPD is obviously good. I see they've got now a fact sheet on workplace mediation, which they didn't, I don't think they used to have that. But I think a lot of HR professionals may not be so involved in CIPD once they're, doing the day-to-day grind of the work. So be interesting. I'd love to join that group. I'll email. Thank you.
We would love to have your insights on that group, and also it could contribute to our comm strategy as well. So thank you.
Yes, thanks.
Thanks very much, Susie. Victor, there's one post question. Have you got time for one very last one?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, okay. It's from Vanita. Vanita, if you're still on, do you want to just pose your question live? If not, I can read it out. I'll just read it out then. When people are ordered to mediate, would this be treated as arbitration?
I think mediation is very different to arbitration, so I don't see that the two are the same, unless I've missed the nuance in the question there.
I think I agree with you. I think it's a very different animal.
Agreed.
But thank you for the question, Benita.
I was actually just going to quickly say that, following on from the comments earlier, I have experienced more court-ordered mediations and also more pre-issue mediations, which I think is a very good sign because people are getting the message.
Great news.
Thanks.
You, Roger.
Thanks, Roger. So thanks again, Victoria. That was really a really great session. We had, I think, 64 people on at maximum, which is a great turnout. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. I'll ask people, first timers, to introduce themselves in a second, but just as housekeeping, the only really thing to do is to say that the next Mediators Peer Support Group meeting will be on Wednesday, the 17th of June. Wednesday, 17th of June. And we have yet to organise the next of these meetings, but it will be in July, as usual, normally the second or third Wednesday.